If you don't know Dr. Arikana Chihombori, she is the former ambassador to the US for the African Union. One thing about Dr. Arikana is she's a firebird. She holds nothing back, and her tongue is a razor that has been cutting deep into the flesh of the West. She holds nothing back. She tells it as it is, and she takes no BS. When it comes to Africa, trust you me, she will speak the truth, and she will speak truth to power. And I suspect that this speech really angered the West and was the beginning of the end of her term as the African Union ambassador to America.
It's easier for a company that's manufacturing the best ceramic tiles in Africa, in Egypt. That company sends its tiles to Italy, only for the Africans to turn around and buy the same tiles, 20, 30 times the cost. Why is it that we are not trading with each other? 1884, fast forward 2019, nothing has changed. The strategy that was put in place to see to it that Africa and her children are forever defeated and dominated remains alive and well.
Hi guys, how are you doing? Thank you very much for joining me on another episode of these videos where we get to discuss all matters Africa, African leaders, and African empowerment, and also just key figures that are standing up against oppression of Africa and encouraging Africans to rise up to the occasion and take up their place in the global map. My name is Ganga. I am a business journalist by profession and also a digital content creator. You can catch me on my YouTube channel at Ganga, where we discuss all matters diaspora, relocation to the continent, and also you can connect with me on social media at Oganga across all platforms, that is Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I am back here today because I bumped into a very interesting speech of Dr. Arikana Chihombori. She is one of the pioneer, and I can say without the fear of contradiction, she's one of the pioneering women that has been very vocal about standing up to the West. You know, she has gotten the agenda on a global platform. She's one of those key leaders who, when she speaks, you listen, because she speaks with conviction. She speaks from her heart. She knows the history, she knows the economics, she knows some of the atrocities that were committed against Africa, continue to be committed against Africa and Black people, and will even be committed in the future, because that's how future centric she is, and that's how well versed she is with the issues. She served as the African Union ambassador to America, and her term came to an end. And you know, she's always been very vocal about the position of the AU and what the AU should be able to do to sort of amass power and ensure that Africans can speak with one voice and in one accord at the global scene. So I bumped into a very interesting speech of hers, and in this speech she holds nothing back. She's calling out the West, she's reading them filth. So when I was in school, they taught us a lot about colonialism, the history of it, how it happened, and some of the impact that it had. But I don't even think that the curriculum understood the depth of colonialism and some of the impact that it had, not just on people, but on the continent. You know, you'll be taught about people were being kidnapped and sold as slaves. You'll be taught about trade. Actually, it's taught as trade. It's not taught as stealing of African resources, looting of African resources. It's taught as trade, for gold for clothes, gold for, you know, that is how we were taught about that history. And in listening to Dr. Arikana Chihombori, then you're like, wow, Africa really lost a lot when it came to colonialism, because she says it as it is. She says Europeans came to Africa and looted African resources.
The more I try to dig deeper in understanding as to why Africa is where Africa is today, I couldn't help but find myself repeatedly going back to the beginning to say, how did we end up where we are as Africans? How did we get here? Not only as Black people, but as Africans. The colonizers started coming to Africa, starting with the Portuguese. followed with slavery. But by 1884, after they had been haphazardly going into our continent, looting from the Africans, pretty soon they started looting from each other the loot that they had looted from the Africans. And before you know it, they were killing each other. And they were getting ready to have a war, a European war on the African soil. So Bismarck, the Chancellor of Germany at that time, called his sidekick Leopold, King Leopold of Belgium, said, listen, we got a problem. We're getting ready to kill each other and have a European war in Africa. Why don't we call all the colonizers? That was France, Germany, Italy, Spain, Portugal, Belgium, and of course the mighty Britain. Let's all meet in Berlin, Germany, and strategize on how we can organize ourselves so we can effectively see to it that Africa and her children are forever defeated and dominated.
And as if that was not enough, as if the exploitation of Africa back then was not enough, the West ensured that Africa will never be able to stand on its own by dividing Africa into very many tiny 52 countries. And by that, you took away the power. I want to take you back to a speech that Gaddafi made. This is not to excuse some of the shortcomings of Gaddafi, but Gaddafi was one of the African leaders, including Kwame Nkrumah, who was saying, why do we have so many African countries? Why can't Africa be one? Why can't Africa speak in one accord? Why is it that you're Rwandese, you're Ugandan, you're Tanzanian? Why are there borders separating us? Why do I need a visa? Those of you who are in Europe can tell us, for as long as you're European, you can go to many of those European countries without many restrictions being put on you. But that's not the same case in Africa. Crossing borders is not an easy thing. And that has curtailed a lot of things on the continent, you understand? And so in dividing Africa and making them so many different tiny sovereign states, you've taken away their power, you've taken away their voice. They can't speak in one accord, you know? It's Kenya speaking to Europe. It's not Africa speaking to Europe.
They proceeded to chop up our Africa into tiny little countries that we know of today. Economies that are designed to see to it that they will never make it on their own. And in the event those small economies do make it, they're easy to destabilize. Who, in their right mind, puts a country together like Gambia, Burundi, Togo, Djibouti, Lesotho, Swaziland, and many, if not all, African countries. Each one of them was given the same sovereignty as China, as India. If this world was to be a boxing game, you see, in boxing, they understand that heavyweights belong in the heavyweight boxing ring, middleweights in the middleweights, lightweights and wannabes in their rings. Wannabes are way out there. You don't take a wannabe boxer and throw them in the same ring with the heavyweight. But what's being done to our Africa? Let's start negotiating. It's country against country. Countries, please stand up. Little Gambia stands up. And Gambia is supposed to negotiate with China. Lesotho is supposed to negotiate with India. Swaziland must jump in with the United States. Djibouti, you must go in You see, the Europeans realized as individual European countries, they can make it. So they came together as the European Union. So they negotiate as a bloc. So yeah, Djibouti, you go in with EU. And when the African countries lose, the world stands back and says, what's wrong with you, African countries? Why aren't you able to manage your people? How can that be? Where is the parity? African countries are wannabe boxers who are constantly being thrown into the heavyweight boxing ring, and we are getting our rear ends kicked day in and day out. (1884), fast forward 2019, nothing has changed. The strategy that was put in place to see to it that Africa and her children are forever defeated and dominated remains alive and well. And yet in our minds we tend to think Berlin Conference is a thing of the past. Well, my brothers and sisters, Berlin Conference is alive and well.
The division also of African countries into tiny states has also made not just trade, as I mentioned earlier, difficult, but movement of people and goods, right? So people cannot move, goods cannot move. For example, if you're an African, some countries will give you one entry visa for 2 years. What am I supposed to do with that? Why can't you give me multiple entries? You know, before your goods are able to make it to another country, the kind of tariff barriers that they will slap on you. I remember, it's just Kenya and Tanzania had issues. Neighbors cannot even trade with themselves. Kenya and Uganda had issues. The previous regime, Ugandan milk could not make its way to Kenya because of such issues. There was one time I was talking to a lady from the Zambian High Commission here in Ghana, and she said Zambia has milk in excess. It has meat. They tried to do a deal with Ghana where Zambia can bring milk and meat in Ghana. It didn't go through. Instead, Ghana prefers to import milk from Scandinavia to be drunk here. It's, my guy, sometimes these things just shock me of how we've allowed our continent to lag so far behind. You buying milk from Scandinavia does nothing for the continent. You buying milk from Zambia does a lot for the continent because you're building local economies. Then it means if that economy is strong, then Africa as a whole becomes strong. It means it creates opportunities. It means that maybe some Africans can go there and benefit from that opportunity. And it's not just a matter of the difficulty in borders and movement of people. There's also an issue of currency. There are over 30 different currencies on the continent, and my oh my, that makes trade very difficult because it means either you trade with the dollar or the euro or the pound.
And allow me to take it home for you. Have you ever wondered why intra-Africa trade is sitting at 18%? I'll tell you why. We have 43 different currencies on the continent. It's difficult to trade with each other because of the currencies. It's easier for us to exchange with the US dollar, with the euro, than with each other. Why is that, Berlin Conference? It's easier for Mozambique to send Mozambican oil outside Mozambique to Europe and everywhere else, just so Zimbabwe next door can buy it from across the oceans. It's easier for a company that's manufacturing the best ceramic tiles in Africa, in Egypt. That company sends its tiles to Italy, only for the Africans to turn around and buy the same tiles, 20, 30 times the cost. Why is it that we are not trading with each other? It's because, starting in South Africa, there's a road that goes up until maybe 2-3 kilometers from the border with Botswana. And that same road picks up 2-3 kilometers into Botswana. And if only we could connect the two. But Berlin Conference said, no, you're different. You're another country. You can't look at it this way. If we were to connect all the existing power lines in Africa today, we would provide electricity to 30 million more people. And in the process, we would save $20 billion. But the reason we can't connect the power lines, thanks to Berlin Conference. We're different countries. We can cross that border. Why are our children crossing the Mediterranean in search of nothing? It's because little Gambia can only create so many jobs. And a young man in Gambia, which is surrounded by Senegal, cannot go to Senegal and look for a job. Thanks to the Berlin Conference. Question then becomes, if you look at all the issues we're dealing with today in Africa, one by one, every one of them relates back to the Berlin Conference and our inability to work together as one continent, one Africa, speaking with one voice.
Anyway, guys, let me know what you think about Dr. Arikana's speech. Do you agree with her? Do you disagree with her? What are some of the sentiments that you share with regards to that speech? I'll see you again next time.